Look, I know who you are.
I know who you are.
But I've known of who you are longer before you knew who I was, because you're a guy that I used to follow that would inspire me, right? I didn't just follow guys like you to be inspired as my daily, inoculation of external motivation. But there are many times in which I almost look at you guys like you're an auto mechanic and you're the race car. So you're your own mechanic and you're constantly going to work and sending yourself out for some laps and coming back in and figuring out what's squeaky on yourself and then trying to fix it. Not a lot of people are built like that. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to do that.
No, not at all.
But there is a standard that you guys have in which it could be universally recognized as that standard is typically higher than what most stoic men are capable of holding themselves accountable to. And I think that's what society looks at as something that's unique. It's very rare. You're the Spartans, our 300, so to speak, of society, right? My thing is, in the community that we come from, you and I, and I say that because there's only two communities I give two shits about, right? And one is the veteran community that my entire lineage is from. And the other is this beloved industry that I call the data center world, which nerds like me have been able to kind of find our way around it and do okay, right?
That all of us depend upon.
And that's what I want to talk about because if you're helping people like me in the way in which you are able to activate society, you're helping me go have a greater impact on community, and that has an impact on industry, and that has a bigger impact on humanity, right? And I think that that's how we dovetail everything together. You and I had a conversation where I felt like we had a very shared passion on certain things. So at that point, people that are military are going to know who you are right away when they see the name. People that don't, I know you're a very humble guy, so you'll probably paint with a broad stroke, but if you can, introduce yourself.
Okay.
Can you?
Yes.
I don't want to introduce you and leave something off.
It's still figuring out what I am. So in a lot of ways, I
Pick
guess
a number.
Post-military. Yeah. That's life. That's life. And that's evolution.
So you are not born and raised in Austin.
No.
So I don't need your name and rank and serial, but where did it all begin, Mike?
So born and raised in the Bay Area. The most of my family was in San Francisco. I was the last of three. By the time I was born, we were in Menlo Park. So I was born in Palo Alto.
Was your dad in tech?
No, he was
Education?
not. No. Our family's been in San Francisco since 1899. So we still got it. I mean, you go to Christmas, it's held at
like San Francisco, or like around
in San Francisco. He went to St. Ignatius. My mom went to presentation when there still was a presentation in San Francisco. Grandfather was a fisherman. Other grandfather was a lead detective for San Francisco. So
really
long roots. I mean, we came across Treasure Island.
Really?
In 1899. My parents will never leave.
Where'd they come from? Irish.
We're actually, the name Sarraille is mispronounced. It got Americanized, as we say. It's Sarraille. If you look at the spelling, it's very close to like the Treaty of
Italian?
Versailles.
Oh, okay.
Basque.
Oh,
So
okay, like French. That's like their Cajun version of.
But it is. And, big Italian roots as well. And that's where most of our family came from. But my dad was in marketing, actually was with Hyatt Hotels when the headquarters was based out of San Francisco. And when they made the move to Chicago, my dad's like, I just can't uproot my
it's a
family.
big difference.
So he broke off and started his own marketing and advertising agency, and came from humble beginnings and did very well for himself. We lived in a town called Atherton.
Yes,
which
I know that town.
Is an affluent city.
A great town.
So didn't grow up didn't grow up with the silver spoon either. Good folks. No real military lineage. My dad was in the Army during Vietnam, but didn't
was he
have to go to
recruited?
Vietnam. He was drafted.
Drafted. I'm sorry.
After college, he finished up and he was drafted. Grandparents, of course, served during World War II, but no, Jesuit educated, big Roman Catholics.
And growing up in San Francisco, growing up in the Bay Area, it's known for a completely different demographic of society that it creates. It's not as known for creating Marine snipers.
No, it's not. Though we had the Presidio, which was a big.
It was still active when you were younger, right?
It was shutting down.
Oh, okay. Because I've been there when it was active.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And most of it's being sold off to to developers. It's a prime piece of real estate that overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge, and beautiful. But went to a Jesuit high school. Wasn't the best student, not from a lack of I would say competency or anything else. It was just a lack of focus.
I don't even think it's that. I've learned this. It could be focus, but to peel that layer back one more is like, I never gave a shit about what my kids' grades are. My kids do great in school. I wanted a sophomore in college at USC, University of South Carolina, and wanted Citadel, a daughter in high school who's doing really well. And I never asked about their grades. And one day they're like, what's up with that? I'm like, I don't give a shit about your outcome. I care about how hard you work.
Yes.
If you got an A and you didn't even try, then I'm not going to be proud of you. And what I learned in talking to them was their grades were really just proportionate to their interest. And that, to your point, the focus.
Yes.
So if they didn't give a shit about that, then yeah, they got a C. But if they really cared about something, an A without effort, right? And I think that's what you want to do, is be like, hey, not everybody's meant to do that, but you can. I mean, there's an app for that. Maybe you don't mean to need that, but but I'm like, interest is what determines your focus, and that's what determines your success. Do you agree?
The way I say it is, I don't put a precedence on education. I put a precedence on learning.
Yeah, there you go.
There's so much learning that goes on outside of the walls of academia. Example, world travel. And I know you probably think the same way, is
Sure.
one of the best educations you can get. It gives you perspective, especially also gratitude for what we have in the United States. And I think that's what a lot of people lose sight of is, there is no perfect human. There is no perfect country. But in terms of like comparison to other countries, we come pretty damn close.
This is fantastic. There's a reason why everyone wants to be here. And those that don't understand that just haven't been to enough shitty countries to understand how great we have it.
I just had a guy on the podcast yesterday for my podcast.
Mike, actually stop right there.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself. I didn't give you a chance to do that properly.
Okay.
Because I'll walk right through.
Absolutely. So enlisted in the Marine Corps after a very short, unsuccessful stint in college.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Which seems to be a common theme.
Yeah.
Had a healthy disrespect for authority, which seems to be a common thing. Yes. And so I had met a Force Recon Marine, and I had to weigh 135 or 140 at the time. And
people that don't know what a Force
Recon is, like the Marine Special Forces.
Yeah,
it's like their version of SEALs. Their history actually
predates.
Yes.
Because they were night riders or night rangers, or
they were known as the Raiders in World War II, mainly in the Pacific, going out in groups of like 50 against numerically superior forces of the Japanese Imperial Army, and just wreaked havoc. It was a sort of disrupt Japanese, so attack and then withdraw right away, and they would stay in the field. 140 pounds, looking at this guy who's a staff sergeant, built like a tank, just humbly confident. And all the other Marines I met, because I was in NROTC at the University of Colorado, which ended up getting kicked out.
I was at the University of Northern Colorado doing the same thing. So we were in the same state.
Really, right?
That's right.
Okay. We always smelled you guys.
Yeah, of course, especially in the spring.
Yes.
Of course, when all that, people don't realize that the largest protein manufacturer in the United States is in Greeley, Colorado, and it's just hundreds of thousands of head of cattle.
Yeah.
And that shit freezes all winter. And then in the springtime, when everything thaws, you get all of that at once, and it radiates all the way down to Fort Collins.
Beautiful. I love Colorado. But this guy, compared to all the other MECEPs, it's the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program. They're all enlisted SEALs who've been identified with potential to become a leader within the officer corps. And this guy took me under his wing and saw that I had potential on multiple levels.
What did he see? You were an athlete, right?
So I was an athlete. So I would, demolish everyone on the physical fitness tests. He saw some intellectual horsepower or effective intelligence. He saw that I loved adventure. He's like, hey man, college ain't working out for you. I had wasted a lot of money that my parents had put in, and before my dad could get my hands on me.
How long were you there for?
For about a year.
Yeah.
I withdrew the second semester from all my classes because I knew the outcomes in terms of grades. And so he took me down along with another staff sergeant who I just respected. They got me enlisted on a recon guarantee, which is a guarantee to take the screener. Okay. Everything worked out. went to boot camp, honor man, School of Infantry, honor man. And then screened for recon, went to BRC, which is the basic reconnaissance course, and became a recon Marine. And then shortly after, I had the opportunity to go to sniper school and became a sniper, and loved it. Loved it. And it was the first realization of you're on your own.
Yeah. Shit. Well, you don't have a spotter with you or something like that?
Oh, so we snipers work in pairs.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the biggest preconceived notions is that the sniper is the one who's good on the gun. And that can be the case, but usually the spotters are the most experienced because calling wins is an art.
Sure.
An art that I never truly picked up. But sniper school was one of the toughest schools I ever went through, where I was on the threshold, this is pretty common for about 90% of who go through it. I think we started with 45 people. We graduated with 12, but the stocking phase, having come from San Francisco and having a lack of
didn't do
time
that
in the field,
yeah.
No, proved troublesome, but I made it through. And then, the Marine Corps in every boot camp does a good job of taking a young man or a woman off the street and turning them into a professional within 2 to 3 months.
Isn't that incredible? People don't realize that pressure testing only takes a few months to change the constitution of a human.
And knowing your audience, which is, people, warriors within their respective profession, as I like to say, sure. Business leaders in the data center, where when I work with companies, I say, this is your onboarding program. Now, can you replicate what the Navy and the Marine Corps do and the Army? And no, you don't. You can't do it 24/7.
Uncle Sam's got it. Yeah. He's figured it out.
But you can establish an onboarding program from day one and this is not a bad thing. Conformity and institutionalization are not a bad thing. When you institutionalize somebody, we always have this negative sort of connotation, but it's getting them to understand the values, the behaviors, the core leadership principles, the purpose, the history of the organization, and establish some sense of pride, and also establishing that. And this is a prerequisite. It's a culture of accountability. Without accountability, you have a culture, just not a culture that's worth a damn.
Yeah.
And reframing accountability in Marine Corps boot camp changed me to the point where my father and I had your typical father-son sort of struggles. I saw him doing the fist shake when we're all in line for the final march to graduate from boot camp, and just our relationship changed.
Of course.
And he was not a big fan of the military. The Army was a different
back in his day.
Different leadership system back in the Vietnam era during the drafty era, which God bless that we're an all volunteer force. When people bring up the reinstituting the draft, it would change the culture
in a negative way.
In a negative way. There's something about an all volunteer force, and if you look, there's a guy at the University of Texas. I know we're here in Austin. He was a brigadier general, wounded 3 times in Vietnam, West Point. The 3rd time was during Way City Cavalry when they were reinforcing the Marines. And so he had to go on the professional sort of professor track and made rank to brigadier general. But he stood up the Leadership Development Center at West Point. And he talked about how it took 10 years from the Army. And again, this goes back to business. Took the Army 10 years to switch their leadership style and culture from a drafty military to an all-volunteer force. You can no longer drag somebody behind the barracks and beat the living snot out of them because they wouldn't obey orders. Didn't work with a volunteer because the volunteer just says, "Okay, screw you guys, I'm out of here after 4 years. If this is the way you treat people." So I found that phenomenal. But the Marine Corps was fun. They also identified, hey, you've done pretty good. You've only had 3 alcohol-related incidents. You're probably officer material. I'm joking about the alcohol-related incidents.
Is there more?
I didn't get caught.
I was like, was there more than 3?
And I loved the camaraderie. I think it is, for vets getting out, leaving what is a tribe in one of the greatest support mechanisms that just can't be replicated in the private sector, but you can get close. That's devastating. They want to feel like they're part of an organization that cares. And I'm about leading from the heart. I'm about an unbroken chain of excellence, which we've seen leaders in the military do. I mean, you mentioned names like General McChrystal, General Scott Miller, you got McCraven here. Their legacy is still being felt by the leaders that are in charge of the military. And regardless of what the media says, at the troop level, leadership is still
solid.
And leading from the heart. And people don't understand that about the military is when people ask me, how'd you leave in the military? Usually I give a response which they don't expect. And I said, it's love, heart. And the highest form of compassion or accountability, or I'm sorry, of love is accountability. 100%. And reframing that accountability isn't this external force that comes in and punishes you. No, it's the mechanism through which we learn. And I'll finish my history, but I remember sitting down with commanding officers as one of their troop commanders, and they'd always give me all their expectations, roles, and responsibilities. And when they were done, say, okay, what do you got for me? And my number one thing would be, accountability is a two-way street. If I see you do something, I'll bring it up because I want to understand why you made those decisions. But if you see me do something wrong, don't wait. Don't see if I mess it up a second time. Pull me in and hold me accountable. And they're going to do it in a professional and tactful way through the Socratic method of, why did you make those decisions? What information did you have that led you to make the decisions, and did the outcomes work as you had expected? Yeah. And they made it a learning opportunity, a philosophical sort of discussion of, hey, what did you learn from this? You're better off for it now. And usually they made the same mistake when they were at my tenure as a mid-grade officer. But so the Marine Corps sent me back to Texas A&M, which, have you been to College Station?
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Oh,
I liked it out there.
Did you?
I like being off grid. It's just a bunch of good old boys out there at A&M, it seems like.
Oh, they are pro-American.
Does that make sense? I'm like, look, you're off grid. There's nothing else there but a university. And I've gone out there for concerts. I've been out there for events that my kids have competed in.
You haven't lived there?
No. I wouldn't want to live there. But it's beautiful to go visit.
It is. It's not a bad place. When I'm complaining about that, I'm complaining about first world problems. But moving from San Diego to College Station without having been to College Station, I remember I'm getting this opportunity to get my bachelor's to become an officer paid.
Oh, that's right. You went to A&M for it, huh?
I did. And I'm on active duty, so I'm still getting paid as a sergeant. So, like, greatest thing in the world. But I remember sobbing to my mom on the phone, who, again, her father was a fisherman. And she said, hey, if you're calling me for a shoulder to cry on for getting a free education, she's like, you've called the wrong number. And she'd always say, suck it up, Buttercup. If you don't like it, finish school and get back to the fleet. The ward kicked off. And so now I feel like you feel like Friday Night Lights, like you've put all this work in and now you're sitting on the bench. And wildly proud of the guys that went forward in Afghanistan in the initial invasion of Iraq. But I'm like, damn, this is going to be over before
you get a chance to fight.
Yeah. And made the decision, went to Marine OCS, again, finished honorman. And I said, hey, I came back to the Marine Corps, said, hey, I think I want to go SEALs. And it was also,
why did you think that? Do you know? Did you meet a SEAL? Of Force Recon is what inspired you to go Force Recon.
Yes.
How to imagine, maybe if you've met a submariner, you've been on the pond with me, right?
And this is, I mean, as you're young, there's a gullibility and naivety, and
that's
you're
great.
Impressionable. And, I say this even to businesses. Your people better understand that when they step out into town, they're representing the organization. I mean, you see organizations, people that like Googlers, they put that out there at a cocktail party with pride. Yeah. Or McKinsey. Yeah. Even if they started at McKinsey and now they own their own venture capital firm, they'll let you know they worked at McKinsey.
Of course.
Because it's like a pedigree.
It's a validation.
It's a validation. And the Marine Corps was not part of SOCOM. Really? And a lot of my recon buddies that were going forward were like, yeah, hey, we were pretty active during the invasion of Iraq, but in Afghanistan, they're like, we're not being utilized. It's the Green Berets, the SEALs, the Air Force Special Operations guys. And I'm like, okay. The Marine Corps, it was a commandant named Al Gray that when he was a commandant when SOCOM post Operation Eagle Claw had happened and SOCOM was being stood up, said, no, the Marine Corps is not going to be part of SOCOM. All Marines are special. And while I understand his pride, it was damaging for the Marine Corps to be involved in it to the point where the global war on terror started. But the Marine Corps, they caught up quick. So it was an easy decision I was called disloyal. by the colonel who's in charge of Texas A&M. But I had this great prior enlisted officer who was the Marine officer instructor. That guy was a commanding officer. And he prepped me for that meeting. And he was great. I mean, he had like 12 kids. This guy was a busy man. He said, hey, the military is going to get their pound of flesh one way or the other. If you want to go be a SEAL, I hate to see you leave the Marine Corps. And he's like, but go do what you want to do. SEALs worked out. Buds was interesting, but that same guy, when he commissioned me, decommissioned me as a sergeant, discharged, and commissioned me as an ensign. I remember the day right after the ceremony, we're walking back to the NROTC building, and he's like, hey, can I give you a piece of advice? I'm like, yeah, of course, sir. And he's like, if you quit Buds, you'll embarrass the Marine Corps. And we are
no pressure.
We are literally crying, laughing, in uniform, hunched over. And he said it to be joking, but within each joke, there's always an element of truth. And I carried that with me to represent the Marine Corps. And so I focused during Buds on leading. And even guys like Dr. Johnny Kim, if you know that name.
Yeah, he lives here in town, doesn't he?
In Houston.
Oh, okay.
The guy he was in my Buds class. He became a SEAL, Silver Star, Bronze Star recipient, became a Harvard-educated Navy doctor, and then
astronaut.
And made it, 12 of 18,000 applicants, and now he's an astronaut. I think he's slotted for
first
a
Navy
lunar
SEAL
mission. Not the first Navy SEAL, because you had Chris Shepard, another just phenomenal human being. He actually saved, I haven't met him, but he saved the Italian astronaut on one of their missions.
Okay.
Where his suit was filling up with I believe water, or it may have been some other fluid. But he talked about how, he respected me because when the class was hurting, I would rally the guys and just focus on leading. And so, always focus on leading your people, and there's a sacrifice there. And it leads to an imbalance because you focus so much, and we all know the phrase "leaders eat last," which Simon Sinek brought to the forefront.
Great book.
But that's yeah. But we've known that for centuries.
I mean, the Marine Corps is probably where that came from first, right? And you guys, the Marine Corps, being part of the Navy, I was introduced to a lot of the Marine stuff, right? And being every man in my lineage is military, I got a chance to see some. And there are certain branches. I mean, the branches themselves cannot be more different from each other. It's almost like another vertical of industry between them. Do you agree?
I say they're all ice cream, just different flavors.
Yeah. And that's good, right? But when you enlist in the military or you go officer into the military, you don't really, you have no idea what you're getting into. Hey, I want to fly. Well, you want to go fixed wing or rotary? You could be in the Army. You could be, every branch has a helicopter. There's so many things you can do, different verticals of industry within military, I call it, right? And you kind of don't know what you're going to do, right? But you do know that all paths lead to every branch of service. You can find a soldier, sailor, or airman that they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, into training them, which means that those people have been conditioned mentally to learn, to grow, and to be a part of a team and communicate upstream and downstream, left seat, right seat, cockpit training. And they know that there's an expectation that someone in a hierarchy has on them, and they need to reach that standard, right? And I think that that's something that the military offers it transcends all branches. The leadership does too, I think, right? Even listening to you talk right now, I've sat down with tons of officers, right? But when you sit down and talk to a Mustang, right? And my dad was a Mustang. He turned 18 in Vietnam loading bombs in F-4s, right? Came out as an 05, thousands of hours in the cockpit of a B-52 and other air, platforms that he's flown, and ran the GPS program for the DoD in the late 80s.
Insane.
When guys like you were the only ones that were able to use GPS as an asset, right?
Yes.
And
it now is commonplace.
It was a tier one.
I'm sure land navigation skills have degraded because of our reliance on technology, on GPS. Yeah.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to that. Yes, you're right. I mean, you're going to have unintended consequences from all elements of technology, right? But it giveth with one hand and taketh with the other.
Yes.
And it normally takes, and we could talk about, we've talked in the past about some of the industrial revolutional shifts and the things that technology gives us in each one of them and the unintended consequences from each. It's not like the military is shielded from those types of things, right? We're human nature. It's just there's a different metric that we operate at there. So it sounds like every step that you were doing was really focused on arriving to a point in which you could discover how you could have a greater influence or impact on others.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's amazing when you meet business leaders, again, warriors within their respective professions who've accomplished some amazing things for which I have the utmost respect. And I'm only 5 years. I'm an FNG. We'll spare a new guy
fleet. You mean
in the civilian fleet? I'm still a new guy. I'm like the guy with 2 deployments that thinks he knows what he's doing, but still figuring it out. I do know.
Have you really only been retired for 5 years?
Going on 6.
Yeah, dude, that's still really fresh. You're still. I mean, technically, you're kind of still in transition. You're like, I don't know how hard it's been. I mean, fast forwarding a little bit. You've broken, with the 777 thing, you've broken records, you've written books, the Talent War, you've been on thousands of podcasts, right? And there's a lot of incredible things, too many this is a longer podcast that we're going to split up, but even then we wouldn't have enough time to talk to it all. But there are significant things that you've arrived at as a leader. And I can't imagine going through the transition that you were going through while simultaneously trying to help others. So try to imagine for those that are listening, because I'm going to tie this together as we keep going, right? Because you don't need me to humanize you, but I do want to let those that don't understand. A lot of times I'm around people, like 1/3 of my staff is military, right?
That's great.
And we have to go above and beyond to make sure that the 2/3 of my staff never feel like there's a club that exists that they're not a part of, right? They're one team, one culture, one tribe type of thing, right? And we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that everyone can understand that paramilitary like mindset. And at the same time, to put it in perspective for the nerds in this industry that are listening, try to imagine putting a 50-pound rucksack on your back and then climbing a 12-foot vertical wall while pulling someone up with you. That's what transition was for you, right? You just probably didn't know that because you've been conditioned and trained for like the harder the better, and I'm meant for this, or like there's a reason why this is hard. I got to figure it out, because some people are just going to go to war with themselves nonstop. The everyday warrior will, you know what I'm saying? So people don't realize, like I started listening to your podcast because you host your own on Men's Journal, Everyday Warrior, right?
Yes.
And I tell people that because people come to me sometimes and I'm constantly in a state of change. I'm always on the move. And we'll talk about that too, because some people are just conditioned to do better at those airspeeds, altitudes and airspeeds, right? And there's balances in life that I've found, that involve me not being around sometimes so much, because too much of me could be a bad thing in certain areas. So I kind of have to go spread some energy around, because I could be too much for too long in one place. And some people that are doing that at your level don't realize that how much that load is. So while you're trying to transition yourself, you're trying to help others transition at the same time. And that's a testament to your love of leadership. Right?
It is. It was, I had some opportunities. I'll finish. Served 10 combat deployments in the SEALs. The majority of those were at JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, where I say that's where my PhD understudy began. Just phenomenal leaders that poured into me.
Yeah, people that don't understand what that is, that's the very, very tip of the spear in special warfare community, correct?
It is.
And it's the team that's called when the president has a very unique or impossible
challenge is what you say. And the projects and things we were involved in were very interesting in the caliber of people based off the screening. The best way to put it is we screen for certain attributes in SEAL training in young men. But when you make it to JSOC, you have to have some experience in special operations under your belt, credibility, and then it's a completely different 9-month screening process where, you've got to show that you still have physical prowess. That's great. But now we're screening you for your ability to make decisions with limited information to maintain performance in a volatile VUCA, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous environment. You're not always apprised of what the standards are, which adds for some people who did very well at the SEAL team to step into an environment where you're like, well, what's the runtime? Just give it your best effort. They completely
destroy you afterwards.
Well, no. They completely just they can't operate in that environment. And additionally, The average age within JSOC is much higher than, let's say, your average
18 to 24-year-olds. Yeah.
And the maturity, and again, the biggest element is trust. We're going to drop you into an environment with very ambiguous orders or a desired end state, and we need you to determine what the best end state is. And that requires a lot of trust. And quite frankly, when you look at teams, two of the most common elements in Google, I'm a big fan of Google. And I'll tell you why, because they spend a lot of money on their talent, and they've produced some major studies that Harvard and nobody else can. One of them was Project Aristotle, which psychological safety, that's a term that's rising to the forefront. Trust and vulnerability are paramount to high-performing teams. But eventually, it's a young man's game, and I petered out on, you're also exposed to a lot of politics. And, again, that naivety when you're young, love of country changes. You're there for the guys, the man and woman to your left and right. And eventually I petered out, and it was just my time. And the SEAL teams hooked me up. Last tour was here in Austin as a ROTC instructor and ROTC Naval. But really I was just getting my MBA for the last 2 years of my career.
Good for you.
And figuring out, because, we're very good at what we do. And a lot of those things translate a lot if you're taught how to translate them, or how to reapply them. But I was the old man, 39, in an MBA program with the average age of 27. And I'll tell you what, those kids were smarter than me. And I was grabbing them left and right. Like, hey, how'd you just do that on Excel? I mean, we use Excel, not formulas as much as the business world. And so it was an eye opener, and it's taken me a number of different ventures to find where my passions are, where I can also apply veterans, adventure, free enterprise, which we defended with our lives, whether, and that's not initially why we went in, but when you realize it, we're securing the economic freedom of the United States. So combining those things into something where I can drive impact, help vets, and take care of my family. And I don't have, people have a relationship with money, and that is a very personal thing between, that you decide. I have no desire to be rich, but I have no desire for my family to be in want. And so I'm not necessarily driven by money. I think we had this conversation. The greatest currency in life is not money, it's impact. Mm-hmm. And I've met a lot of people who are rich in the bank and poor in character. And the opposite of that, people who are poor and just high in integrity, character, and driving impact, even at a local level.
Yeah, you don't have to compromise one thing for the other. I think a lot of people, we're humans. We weren't born with all the answers. We have to learn them. We're also a product of our environment. So if we are surrounded by inferior, we will tend to become a product of that. But if we're around people that we immerse ourselves in, that have the aptitude and the desire and passion to teach and learn, we just learn from being around them, right?
Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another.
I really saw another one the other day, and I'm going to start using this one a little bit more, but because I think everyone understands that phrase. But I think the only way to iterate off that phrase is like, people sharpen people is really what we're talking about. And let's humanize it more, right? Because not everybody, like you say, you do a really good job with your part by trying to make it, it dovetails to everybody, right? Which is, everybody's a warrior at some point, in some capacity. It's a maternal instinct, it's a
mindset.
It
not
is.
The profession of carrying arms. It is a mindset. I've met single mothers who, have two kids that are sacrificing everything, that were more of a warrior than some of the guys I served with, which were war fighters. There's a distinct difference between war fighters and warriors. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but you can be both. But sometimes there was guys that were war fighters that, quite frankly, I just didn't want to be around during the weekends.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've been around warriors that are also poets. You know what I'm saying? Like you could be around people that are the most stoic and tough that you've ever met. And at the same time, they'll never compromise the integrity of their character or their constitution as a human on the things that they stand by. I was talking to my CRO on the way here, and I said, look, people that are easily afraid are never going to be strong leaders, because the minute that they are scared of something that tests their loyalty, that loyalty for that person will always erode, right? And it's because of fear, right? And I look at this and go, you need people that have confidence, and warriors are the ones that are constantly going to war with the inner bitch or the inner champion inside their head to figure out who's going to win today. And am I going to suffer the existence I create, which will be based on the negative overtones? Because my mind is designed as a caveman to be in concern of everything. When I walk out of the cave in the morning, the caveman was like, I need to find food to survive. I need to hydrate to survive. I need to make sure nothing eats me. And I probably will need some heat, and I need shelter tonight, right? So, I mean, our primate brains are just thinking about the worst case scenario all the time. There's a reason why solitary confinement is the harshest form of punishment. They want your mind
connection.
And those warriors are the people that are like, not only do they not need your help, but you couldn't stop them anyway, based on how convicted they are in their own thoughts, right? And that can be a woman who is single with 2 kids, and just, I think, one day wakes up and decides they're not happy with the circumstances in their lives, and they put that chip on their shoulder with the grit that they were born and raised with, and they get to fucking work, right? So a warrior could be anybody, and I wanted that conversation for you and I to have with my community too, right? Because I told you before we started, I only care about 2 things. I care about the veteran community. And as you pointed out, it really only takes 90 days to make a veteran, right? Does that make sense? I mean, we send our sons and daughters to a place that is the ultimate institution or incubator for pressure testing, right? It's stress inoculation from day one. It's not like to the level what you went through Force Recon or as a SEAL, but that's not meant for everybody, right?
And it shouldn't be. Let me say this. There is a fascination with special operations, and I understand why. Special operations doesn't win wars. The support mechanism that we had, all the people that enabled us to do what we do, I had a lot more respect for them than I did for myself. And I think that's also why sort of those that were in logistics, admin, intelligence, transition out of the military better, because they were always in a support role, rather than us thinking we are the there's probably
7 people, 8 people per person that the place you're at, you probably had 5 to 10 people.
1 to 15. 1 to 15 ratio. Yeah. If I needed something, it was done. And that can also be damaging when you get out to think that you're going to, I tell so many vets, it's not a lateral transfer out. You're moving down. I don't care if you're a colonel that had this support staff mechanism. It's not the same. This is also why I have a deep respect for my father, and business leaders as a whole. We were given a mission, multiple missions during our time in the military, and they're limited in scope. And once you've achieved mission success, we reset and just keep training. Business doesn't stop. You launch an initiative, it launches successfully. We have about a 5-minute congratulatory.
And you're only as good as the last win.
And then the business doesn't stop. It is, and here's the other thing. And I've evolved on this, and very few military leaders will say this. And I'm no longer a military leader. It's what I did. Is it a big part of my DNA? Yes, and I'm trying to evolve. It was easier to lead in the military than it is the business sector. And I'll tell you why. Because you went through hellacious training, bled, sweat, cried at times. Yeah, and I cry quite a bit. But then there's this sense of pride and an overwhelming, very defined purpose. And in the military, whether, I got along with certain guys or not, they're going to get the mission done. And that doesn't necessarily exist in the private sector. Some people are coin operated. They're just holding the job, as we say, they work to live.
Yeah.
And they identify with something else.
I think let's be honest, right? We were born and raised around the same time. I'm a few years older than you, but when we were born and raised, doesn't matter. Our parents were all telling us the same thing, and that was go to school and get good grades. And if you could do that, then you could go to a good college. And if you do that, then you get a good job. If you get a good job, you could get money. And if you do that, you'll be happy. And that's the construct that society says is the ticket to happiness. So those that were performing or going in the military like us, because I just didn't have the aptitude to sit around in a room all day in a homogenous environment like that and let them just speak at me all day. And I just have to I needed to have hands-on shit. And I just was uninterested in what that had to offer me. But I tried it because that's what society said to do. And I think that that's changing now. My industry is changing it too. Like there's going to be there's a lot that you have to offer to teach me and the people that are listening.
And likewise.
About the mindset. And I want to help you understand what you have learned and what the military has invested into you, how that transcends into our world. Because a lot of people don't realize our industry, right? They just don't realize that every other industry grows proportionate to our ability to grow, because every company's ability to grow and scale is a function of their access to resources around technology. And the adoption rate of emerging technology all ends up in one place. You as the consumer or you as the business, it does not matter. It all ends up in a data center. You touch on your phone 10 data centers a day. You just don't know it. And the most consumers don't.
As we say, you don't see the sausage being made behind the scenes.
Yeah, people are like, it's in the cloud.
But and some people want to be, one, it's beyond their understanding, and I may fall into that category, but they don't want to understand that, nor maybe should they. But the amount of people, the amount of systems, the amount of technology that's required to keep our economy running is dependent on what you guys do. And I think it's not readily understood yet, but we're also still in that industrial. Yes, exactly.
So, we were talking, I'll paint with a really broad stroke because I hate talk. I'd rather hear from you, but I do feel it's worth, you and I will be able to play off a few things together, I think, with this. I was telling you, I think when we were talking, people don't realize it took more than 40 years before 25% of our population adopted electricity when it was first introduced. That's a utility, right? And then it took, 35 years before 25% of the US population adopted an automobile. It could have been 38 years. And if you keep looking at emerging technologies, how long it takes for people to adopt it. I mean, it took 13 years before people adopt 25% of the US population use the internet, right? I mean, you can go on, and you could go to, hey, it took 5 years to reach 100 million users on Instagram. And it took, TikTok 9 months to get to that, but it took ChatGPT 5 days, right? So we know what the linear trends of adoption rate of emerging technology looks like going all the way back to the first utility, right? But if you look at these utilities and you add them all up, electricity, plumbing, gas, which you'd have at your home or even at these data centers that are natural gas or diesel, and then you have connectivity. I mean, can you imagine not having internet in your house, right?
It would be very tough to imagine that life.
It's a connectivity. It's a utility. But if you take those four main utilities and add them together, they add and they create the engine for AI, the sky for the cloud, and that is the technology engine of data centers. So every time that you use technology, it goes back into us. And we have this group that is coming out of its infancy this year. This year, data centers will be on the front of the lexicon for everybody because you're not going to miss it. Bloomberg just announced $150 million Amazon just announced on the first day of the second quarter, which was a major show of force.
Yes.
To announce, hey, we had maybe a small decrease in how much capital we've spent last year, but they are 2x over the number 2 cloud provider in the world, right? Which grew by 50% in capital, right? Yeah. And if you look at that, Microsoft is number 2 in the world in cloud, and they spent 50% more last year than they did the year before, while Amazon was regressing by 2%. Well, at the same time, maybe Microsoft was gaining the advantage on AI, while Amazon's now going to play a little bit of the AI game. But they announced that they're going to spend $10 billion a year for the next 15 years as a minimum to support the surge of adoption rate of emerging technologies like AI. So that's going to require leaders and people, right? And that also requires a lot of power. And we come from an environment that deals with people, leaders, and power. You and I both do, depending on which side of the rock we stood on, right? Or different side of the pond we stood on. My thing is people here are gaining access to data at rates that they've never had before. We've created more data in this world in the last 12 months than we have in the history of the world combined. And we are just now adopting generative AI.
It's hard to believe when you say we're in our infancy.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, what are you talking about?
So let me nerd with you on something. Is that cool? So the first industrial revolution was 1760. All right. It started, in that time, we created a lot of things, including a new nation. We had a revolutionary war. From a technology perspective, we created the cotton gin, which changed society. We also got our first form of power, which was the steam engine. So that gave us the locomotive train, which changed the fabric of the world. And then you had this huge break in between the first and the second. And what that break was from, it's about 35 years before the first and the second was wars. right? So, and then we got into the second industrial revolution. And that's where we discovered power, right? Electrical power and the motor engine, right? So in that time frame, they put a patent down on the combustion engine, but we didn't turn it into an automobile until the second industrial revolution. And every time that we gave our country new technologies, there's unintended consequences: urbanization, pollution, horrific labor rates. I mean, Henry Ford was the first to announce an 8-hour workday and a 5-day work week, right? So that took time to get to that part where we started, using manufacturing plants, and that's a technology, right? And there's unintended consequences. In the first industrial revolution, we also got the Colt revolver. What were the unintended consequences of having revolving handguns in the hand of so many people? Well, in some cases, it helped save a lot of lives, and in others, it probably took a lot, right? We had a break between the second and the third, and that was because we had World War I, Prohibition, the Depression, World War II, Korea and Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that, in 1969, we started the third industrial revolution. That's when we were born, right? At the beginning of that, a lot of technologies came out, right? We have obviously nuclear power, because in the middle of these industrial revolutions, we created nuclear weapons. But we also had our first computer technology. We started getting into, in the third industrial revolution, we mapped our genetic DNA. We got people into space. We started building large computers. So we had all kinds of new powers that were emerging. But the trends between all industrial revolutions have always been power. So in the third industrial revolution, unlike the other revolutions that followed, we had breaks in between because of these major nasty wars. That third industrial revolution for our generation was like the convenience of food, which we call fast food now. We had never understood what the social impact would be, or
the unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences.
Health. Yes.
Well, look, the pendulum shifts. It's always Goldilocks model. It's too hot before it's too cold, before it's just right. So in every industrial revolution, we get these unintended consequences. In the next industrial revolution, we solve for it, right? So we normally are fixing the things that we're doing from the past one, and we just keep doing that, right? And some industries are evolving in this time frame, like law, healthcare, medicine, practicing medicine. Those things became really mainstream industries because they developed ethics, right? And ethics were designed to help people discover what they would do before. Like, hey, we don't want, like in the military, we are all about that. Like, how many times did you train something before you did it? You didn't be like, I think this is going to work. I mean, maybe you had crazy missions where that's the only option.
No.
We trained religiously. When you're on a submarine, I mean, I deployed for 288 days a year on average for 3 years. Well, it's no different than what you had to do, but I was on a submarine. I wasn't getting shot at. The only consequence
you're dealing with, in a sense, and I know you're one arm length away from somebody. There's isolation. Even if you're surrounded by other people, there's isolation.
We didn't have internet back then, so when you pulled the plug and went deep, you were off the grid. There was no like, hey, cheat. There was none of that business still, right? So it was. I actually liked that. I loved living in that era. Without cell phones, without technology, I could live like that.
And nukes and submariners, I mean, they screen you for a specific set of attributes.
I'll ask you if you got some daddy issues and mom issues for sure.
The submariners are a different breed that are built for that. I'm going to tell you right now. I just took a F-16 ride with the Thunderbirds about, and when I say just, 3 months ago.
It must have been bomb.
Had the barf bag at the ready. Hit the 9G club, passed out twice, landed, and just said, hey, you guys are good at what you do. Was not built for that. Thank you for the ride. It was a lifetime, once in a lifetime experience. But you go back to every department or function in an organization or the military, there are people that are just good at that. Had you put me in charge of admin, that probably would have been the worst department within any organization because it's run by me.
Yeah, take a number. We all have great strengths. We're all warriors in something, right? But to be really, 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 to be willing to be great at something, you have to be willing to suck at a lot of shit, right? And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So they'll try to put 4 or 5, when they're going 4 or 5 different directions, sometimes they're going nowhere. And you have to really commit to being great at a craft of some kind, right? And we have to know when we suck at things. Like I'm not in aviation. I have a brother that flew Blackhawks. I know that I would throw up just in one of those things. Right. So I'm like, there's no chance I want to be up in the air. I don't even like roller coasters. Right. And I think the thing that, I think there's not too many young men. Like I was pretty fit. I was competitive. I was wrestling and stuff. And I always did well on all my PT things. And obviously there's times where people are like, how come you don't go try to do that? I'm like, have you seen how cold that shit is? Have you ever seen the videos of them just jackhammering, freezing? I'm like, that's where they lost me. I'm like, if I could go to a program where I get to shoot people, but I don't have to be freezing all the time, but that's why people like me weren't meant to be doing what you were doing. I'd go do the Super Seal in Coronado and do that race all the time. And it's freezing. It's like March. You guys are that's like a regular PT workout. And I was losing my motor skills in transition, trying to put my shoes on because it's Silver Strand Beach. It's flat, maybe a little bit of a headwind going one way, tailwind coming back. It's still cold as hell, right? And I'm like, the same for me. I'm not about that, right? So everybody has things. And I was like, I think I'd rather be on a submarine. I don't want to be cold, right? So I took that submarine because it was a little bit more comfortable than the environment that you're in.
What draws somebody to a specific job is based off of their life experience and their perspectives and their experiences. And I don't know why I was drawn into special operations, or let's just say the ground arms, sort of community. But as you get to it, is you have people, and I do believe in diversity. When you have people with all these ranges, and I mean, the military is just, you want to talk about diversity?
Yeah, no kidding.
First time I'd met somebody from Louisiana and Kentucky was during Marine boot camp. And I was shocked by just how diverse the group was, and they have different life experiences and perceptions based off of those experiences. But
there's a lot of value in that.
Diversity requires one thing: alignment. It also requires that, integrity and character. There's a standard, and you've got to meet that.
I think that's a like the rules of engagement. Yeah.
But, I was shocked. People talk about leadership and management. So you have all these people with these different set of skills, even within a SEAL element. Someone is good at this, somebody is good at this, somebody loves and is passionate about this, and they're good at this. And that's where management comes in. And often we hear people talk about, you lead people, you manage things. That's a little inaccurate. That's actually highly inaccurate. I mean, you look at battlefield management, your array of forces, where you allocate, and it's resource allocation. That's management. So it's a combination of both. To put it into naval terms, leadership sets the direction, and management is what steers the ships. You look at systems. Systems really come down to three things. One, people. Everything comes down to people, and you always see that's the common denominator. The second is technology, and I don't care if that's a stone and chisel or AI.
Yeah.
Whatever that technology is, and then lastly, it's process.
But technology is the base of what you're talking about.
Yes. And process comes down to routines and behaviors, which again ties back to people. So your systems are as stellar of a leader as you got to be to take a group of people, give them a common vision, set expectations, and there's difference between expectations and standards. Clearly defined standards of what's acceptable and unacceptable in terms of behaviors and culture and values and things along those lines. You've got to then manage those people based off their talents and who you allocate to what.
What do you always tell people? I know what I tell people when they ask me what the difference between management and leadership is. And I mean, I'll go first. Simple. It's one word. One inspires and the other one tells you what to do, right? Like leaders typically inspire, and there's a limit to how many, like 8 people, when you do the math, you hear all kinds of different people tell you how many people you could effectively lead at any one time, but how many you can manage is different, right? But I do think the difference between a strong manager and a strong leader is the leader will inspire those from the inside, right? Where a manager is just going to externally motivate them to do something and go execute tactically on that. What do you use as a definition? I mean, how do you define the difference between a manager and a leader?
Inspiration is probably the best definition. I think this is where we see eye to eye. Again, you go back to Google, and Google did Project Oxygen, which was a 10-year study of what made their best managers so great. They came up with sort of 10 key tenets, and guess where technical skill came into place?
Probably last
8.
Yeah. 8. I mean, like, it's funny because you wrote a book called The Talent War, and your company's called The Talent War Group, and we never fully got through your whole explanation.
It's fine.
We'll get there.
People bore.
No, this is perfect. We're going to go back and forth.
Yeah.
This, look, for the record too, I hope that this won't be the last time that we talk, right? Because I'd like to help integrate you more into our community. You come from the first community I come from. I mean, was your father enlisted?
He was enlisted. All were enlisted.
So you were raised by an enlisted person, enlisted yourself, and then went to the officer route, right? You were a Mustang. So there are advantages of learning how to lead from the enlisted ranks as well as the officer side.
Some of the best leaders I've ever had were what we call senior enlisted advisors or very senior enlisted.
I'm getting ready to try to hire one of them myself. And he was an NCO, a senior NCO that had one of them, outside of my father, perhaps, probably had one of the most profound impacts on my life, right? And I was a dopey sailor. I did break the record for how many times you can make junior sailor or the whatever and get brought back to the ship zip tied by the shore patrol, right? Like, I don't know why they tolerated my bullshit. I think it's because I could perform, but like, I wasn't there to comply. I was there like, I'm a junior sailor. I got nothing to lose. What are you going to do? Take away? Like, I got nothing, right? Let's go live this. And I loved that part, right? I loved being in the military. It's the greatest fraternity in the world, right?
And sorority.
Yeah, for sure.
In a lot of ways.
It's less than 1% of the U.S. population joins, and they join to make a difference. None of them joined the military to make money. They all did it to make a difference. And when they transition out, they want to go take something that they've learned, which is significant. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, into each one of these people that are transitioning out of the military. So they know how to learn. They like to be led. They are capable of leading, and I don't hire for talent. I don't even hire for experience. I only hire on personality now because everything that happens in my industry reinvents itself every month because of people like you that are out, people like us, the consumers, with all the eyeball content, video caching, however you're using, from spreadsheets to websites, it don't matter. Technology's demand is changing what we do, and the adoption rate of emerging technology forces us to reiterate what we do on a monthly basis. This industry reinvents itself faster and more than every other industry because of every other industry. If you're in the airline industry and your primary line of business is to put airplanes in the air and fly people around, you don't give a shit about all the technology shit. You want that as a service so that you can focus every ounce of the wood behind the arrow on the things that generate revenue, right? And for us, even Google, there's a guy there named Steve Ford, retired colonel, Army Reserve, and has a lot of connections into the military. He did 10 years for Christian Bellotti at Microsoft before he's making a huge impact at Google. And he leads based on the fundamentals of things that he's learned from the military. The military already has a profound impact on companies like Google because they have so many former military that are there, and they're very diverse. And the beauty, like I brag to people not on how many veterans I have in my business, but how diverse it is. 1/3 of my company is also diverse. 1/3 of my company is veterans. It's because I hire a lot of veterans, and the military is the most diverse workforce in the world. Like, did you give a shit about what other people's gods were or who they married?
Who they loved? No. You cared about the content of their character.
That's it.
And if they were competent and reliable. Because dependability and reliability are two of the highest accolades in the military.
Exactly.
Two of the highest accolades because they're going to get it done.
But that's the currency of veterans. So like I try to tell people, I'm like, it's economically efficient to hire veterans, not because it pencils out, more creatively, but because they are just willing to work proportionate to the value that they have as long as they're provided a purpose. If people don't have a purpose, if they don't feel safe in what they're doing and they're unable to be fulfilled by what they're doing, then they're going to commoditize themselves and say, I need more money. But they went to that company and took that job in the first place with whatever they were being offered. At some point, it was good enough for them. They no longer are inspired. And because of that, I want more money. And if I'm not, then the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And I'm going to go find another title or go work for another company to get the money I want. And if I'm not going to be happy, then at least I'll get paid proportion to value.
Yeah.
But that's the entire workforce, right?
Yeah.
And we are trying to take people that are like, I haven't even got into what our industry, we've talked a little bit, but I want to share it with you because I want to open it for you, and I want you to unpackage some of this with me because I'm having you here because I've hit a plateau, right? Like every time that I hit a limit of what my knowledge base is, I have to ask a subject matter expert to come in here. And there are people that look to me and be like, hey, what do you think I ought to do? I'm like, guys, I'm running out of bags of tricks here. So I got to go to these savages in the world and be like, hey, you're a leader. There are people that are the Mike Sarrailles of their world in this industry too, that I get to immerse myself around and be like, how do I become a product of that environment? What can I learn from this? How can I gain from this? The reason why we even did the podcast is because I could reach more soldiers, sailors, and airmen through this microphone than I can by hosting a single conference once a year in Austin, right? And I bring in so many military for that at no cost in uniform. I normally run around it and they're all walking out. So many of them are getting jobs coming away from those conferences. I'm not getting paid for any of those things, but I'm fulfilling my purpose, which is to make that impact, right? I want to make an impact on these people coming out because you and I both know that they didn't join to make money. They did it to make a difference. If we could give them an opportunity to make a difference coming out and they could still feel significant in what they do, they're less likely to hurt themselves and they could still contribute to their families, their communities, society, humanity. But more importantly for me right now, selfishly, this industry. So this industry is 300,000 people short right now of what we're doing.
And that's just now, I'm assuming.
And we're facing what's called a silver tsunami, which means that more than my industry
is that an industry term?
Yeah. So
okay.
Let me walk you through it because let me dovetail back to the third industrial revolution. What I was trying to say is every industrial revolution gives us unintended consequences. Let's think in the third, it was a lot. I focus hard on fast food because, I mean, today you could eat fast food 4 meals a day. That's how available it is to you. Do you do it?
No.
Okay.
But have there been times?
Of course, because we all did. We didn't know. And then once you learned how it impacted your body, you're like, well, look, it's an affordable luxury that I may have on a Friday night when I'm doing pizza with my kids, but I don't eat like that.
Those are cheats. Yeah, and everyone, convenience is one of the most damaging things.
Yes.
Because something is convenient, does it mean you should engage in it? No. So is alcohol, going to the bar. And I've had my periods.
Sure.
The ability in the Everyday Warrior, which is a no-hack practical approach to life. That was the second book I wrote because of the talent war. So the talent war was the first one, how special operations, great organizations win on talent. When I wrote that and I was on the circuit of speaking to companies, people were like, we love this. How do I integrate this on a personal level? And I'm like, you know what? So there's a category, and you know this, within book writing or even coaching, it's self-help. I hate that term. I hate that term. I said, this is a self-leadership book, and it talks about self-accountability. It talks about self-discipline without the need for external
I call it home
forces.
improvement. I call it home improvement.
Home improvement. So I really did enjoy that book. And what, again, within your industry, I'm going to be honest, and they're listening. I had a company reach out from Silicon Valley, which again is my hometown. 3 people were fired up to bring me in, and they went out, and I think I told you the story, and they're like, oh, not another military guy.
Well, sure.
And it's fighting that stigma of there are some guys out there that wanted, it's motivational speaking. I'm not engaged in motivational speaking. What can I do to come in within a 4-hour workshop or an hour and a half keynote and actually give something that's actionable for these organizations, whether it's the onboarding process, talking about culture, talking about other facets of leadership, which is so vast. No one is a subject matter expert in leadership. It is...
it's a craft.
You said you're always in change, a perpetual state of change. The people that are in, which is not comfortable, constantly pushes you outside your mental and physical comfort zones, which is the only area that actual true learning and growth plays. And as we get older, I always say psychology is lazy at the root of it. And what I mean by that is people always default to the path of least resistance. Oh, fast food's right there, rather than taking the fish out of the fridge
and cooking it and having a relationship with your meal.
Right. Exactly. So people always default to the path of least resistance, which is comfort and convenience.
Whatever's easy.
And the fact that you're in a state of change, which is probably makes the people around you a little miserable, just like my wife is miserable. Sometimes she's like, just relax for a moment.
It's hard to do that. It's harder.
I don't know if this is a genetic thing for people. Some people just can't do that. They can't slow down. When I slow down, idle hands are the devil's work. I start to implode.
Sabotage yourself.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. You did say something. You don't hire for talent. Let me give you, and this was the whole book. People have very different definitions of talent. And actually, let me step back from that, and I'll get back to that point. You talked about leadership and inspire. We did a poll on LinkedIn. What is your definition of leadership? And guess what? Everyone's definition of leadership is correct, again, based off their perspective and experience. Yeah. You'd be shocked by the number one answer. And I know people didn't.
Power.
The ability to manipulate others to your will.
Damn.
And I know people probably didn't say that with the intended meaning. I don't want to manipulate anyone. The leaders who manipulate, who are conniving, they're rats. And eventually that will come back.
Those days are almost over. It's fleeting. And I'll tell you.
Are they though?
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So we live in an environment where like the reason why you don't eat fast food is because you have access to more information now.
Yes.
Either through your doctors or through the internet or through whatever, right? That the unintended consequences of having access to everything gave platforms to really mentally unhealthy people that allowed them to represent a part of society that maybe wasn't quite as big or significant as others thought, or how the traditional corporate media made it look. And what we've learned on our own is that we can just go explore things on our own, and we can aggregate and collect data, and we could discover, as an example, like maybe eating McDonald's 3-4 times a day ain't that good for me after all. And maybe I could go have a higher level of output or productivity as a human along all aspects of myself, right? I was a son before I was a brother, before I was a father or a husband or a soldier, sailor, airman, whatever, right? So I was all of those things, right? So I don't eat shit like that because I know better. It's not because it's not available. It's because now I know the unintended consequences of that. I think is a good example. Look at the explosion of gyms that are like, how many people, you couldn't find bikes during COVID. Everyone was buying bikes, but everyone started.
Peloton saw chaos.
So watch, because in that third industrial revolution, we're mapping our genetic DNA, we're putting people on the moon, we're creating all kinds of, we really started our first AI platforms technically, but compute power was just as significant as nuclear power, which was delivered, but every industrial revolution gives us power. And in the fourth, we use that power. And unlike the other industrial revolutions where there's typically a gap in between, when we got into the third industrial revolution, we ended right at the dot-com bust. And in 2000, we started the fourth industrial revolution, which is where we started, now we could genetically edit our DNA, and we are creating AI and AR and VR and quantum compute. And now we have a whole nother iteration of power, right? And with that, again, like, who knows what the unintended consequences are given people social media, but I could tell you right now that people were bullied, or people harmed themselves or committed suicide as a byproduct of information being so readily available. But a lot of the information that's becoming more available for all of us is allowing a greater awakening, right? So there's the physical aspect of what we do. There's the spiritual aspect of what we do. There's the mental. Yeah. And that's the 3 dimensions of people, right? So if you look at that, people are, when I was younger, I remember looking at commercials that told you that 4 out of 5 doctors would recommend Camel Lights because they were a better cigarette. And you would see billboards for the Marlboro Man. We don't see that shit anymore because we learned, a whole new industry of healthcare. Protein and, the shakers and the weights and all the vitamins and the nutrients that people are doing. But now people are like, maybe I need to pay more attention to this organic shit. Maybe I need to figure that out. But people are learning, and there's an awakening going on as information is allowing us all to educate ourselves at our own rates or pace, right? And we're allowed to dig deep on the things that matter most to us, and we can really become subject matter experts within ourselves. There's a guy that I went out with last night who I'm definitely going to introduce you to. He was an ODA guy, former Delta guy.
Damn.
Amazing dude. He's a captain in this industry. He's been a mentor for many of us. Bill Mazzetti, if you're listening, you're a rock star. And
I was going to say, highly impressed.
Yeah.
Impressed. Yeah.
Maz was a Delta dude. Look, he also, you and him would have a lot of very similar stories of crazy things because he has that stuff, but he has a big fat brain. He's a licensed PE. He's been an authority in power and data centers for 20 plus years. And like, we have these people around us all the time. And I'm talking to him yesterday, and he's lost like 60 pounds since the last time I saw him in a very healthy way. He looks 10 years younger. And, I'm doing this whole part called the human reset, which we're going to talk about. But I said, how'd you do it? And he goes, I'm not diabetic, but he went and got one of those things, snapped it in his arm, and started tracking what he was eating himself. So he's like, yeah, if I was going to eat fruit, I want to see what it did to my sugar. If I'm going to eat rice, I want to know what it did for and people are just biohacking themselves more, and they're taking it upon themselves to utilize technology and access to information to come to the realization of what's good and what's in their highest good. And they're going to make the same decisions that they make on the other things that are harmful or destructive to themselves as they do to the easy ones that we know that are harmful. They're not eating Taco Bell for dinner and McDonald's for breakfast every day. They're pretty much, look, I've learned that like you, right? You went through all this incredible training, and you can look at your body, and obviously you take care of yourself. You know where the gym's at, but most people don't realize that the body is a direct representation of the mind, and they don't realize how much you've calloused your brain to reach you talk with it because you're very, obviously you're a very humble guy. But I think everyone right now knows how hard it is to accomplish the shit that you went through. There's movies about SEALs left and right, and there's movies about recon and
yes.
But Hollywood's a great tool. It does a lot of recruiting.
It's the biggest recruiting tool for the military, bottom line.
And look, I love those stories too. I want to be inspired. Those things inspire me. And why not have that? Those are real heroes most of the time. And no one gives a shit about all the X's and O's and how they line up. The spirit of this is that we are good people doing good things for other good people. We are our brother and sister's keeper. What do you need to know beyond that, right? That's a beautiful thing, right? But people don't realize how much pain you've gone through to get to the levels that you've reached at. It's about a function of endurance, of how much can you endure, how much can you suffer. I've reached, for me, I was like, I tap out at cold, I'm good. I mean, I got nothing to prove to anybody. I feel like I'm good at what I can do. I don't need to go do those other things. I don't need to be cold, and I don't want to be, right? But guys like you are like, fuck it, let's see how cold we could take it. I'll take that other round. Give me the other, whatever it is you're going to do, you're going to just do more. And the world needs those people, but we need those people to make those impacts. And that's why I'm like, there's a ton of people that I get to work with that are amazing. They're like the single moms with 2 kids at home, and they're warriors, right? And I have them. Jen Reniger, I mean, she's one of them. My thing is that there's so many amazing people in this industry, and I don't have the skills to teach them, right? I don't even have the answers. I'm a student myself. I'm a product of, I just listen to more podcasts. I'm tracking down guys like you all the time. I'm trying to get an audience and figure out how can I level up so I could have a greater impact than those around me. But we need this. And I understand, you're right. No one needs another veteran type of thing. And I don't think that narrative's over with. But I do think people just objectively are like, I wanted you to come on here and talk about the things that you are so that others can relate and be like, well, dude, it's not like if they asked you a question, you would laugh at them.
Not at all.
Do you see what I'm saying? So what you get is leaders that come from the military have a great deal of love. And it's not toxic empathy. It's not like a desire to please people. They love you enough to hold you accountable to the standard in which you're capable of.
It's no different than parenting. And I actually talk about this in the in my speeches. This is one of the core parts when I talk about love. If you see your child do something wrong, very few parents won't step in, and hopefully in a very professional, loving, tactful way, try to get them to critically think about what they just did and the outcomes and what they learned from it. I mean, at the end of the day, and I think you'd agree, we want our kids to be kind, empathetic, respectful human beings who contribute to society, but more importantly, because we're not going to be around forever, have the ability to stumble, pick themselves up, learn, and then pass it on to the next generation, which is that unbroken chain of excellence. The best generation is always the next generation if we make it so. And you bring up technology and the access to information, which is a superpower that any other generation would look at us and be like, you guys have it made. But technology without actioning that information and then showing the discipline and accountability to put it into practice, then we're not utilizing technology to the fullest extent.
But we're using it in this parade, without technology, I wouldn't be able to introduce you to my industry.
No.
And there's a shit ton of people in this industry that are starving to understand, where can I find the tools? Which books? Who do I talk to? And what I'm saying is, I'm like, Mike, there are plenty of companies here that hire veterans. They kind of get it. They don't have the answers. And there's guys like me that are veterans that are in it. And I didn't go through all your training, and I didn't get all the leadership training you have. I'm a product of amazing leaders who just for whatever reason loved me enough to look past my shortcomings and on my many blind spots and decided to help make me a better person. And I'm like, how do I put more of what you have to offer society into my industry, which is probably starving for that more than any other industry because of every other industry's growth?
And let me sort of, I'm starving for it as well. I don't have this figured out. There was a great leader. His name was Chris Fussell. He was one of my commanding officers. And Chris actually, I think he's still the president of McChrystal Group. That's General McChrystal Consultancy.
Great book.
Oh, dude, it's mandatory reading. I should be promoting my own books at speeches. I actually leave here are 5 books that you guys need to read. It needs to be mandatory. Team was
fantastic book.
Team of Teams is the number one. because that guy achieved what we call level 5 leadership that Chris talks about.
Global.
Where again, this term, unbroken chain of excellence, the McChrystals of the world poured into leaders that then went on to pour into the generation behind them. And that's that unbroken chain. But so Chris helped pen Team of Teams. He was aide de camp. Trying to think of explaining that in a way that doesn't, I don't want to use the word executive assistant, but basically it is to a general. It's
chief of staff type of thing.
Yes, chief of staff. And when I got under Chris's command, he was actually taking command of the squadron as I was arriving as well. And he said, hey, every Friday, I want all the officers in my office at 10 a.m. And first I'm like, we got shit to do. What? Like, I've got a training schedule. We've got deployment. Who does this guy think he is? Like, you're going to take 2 hours of our time when I need to be with my guys, making sure that we're training to the standard. And so I went in with crossed arms. By the end of that meeting, it was like a little schoolgirl, because this guy is one of the most loving guys you'll ever meet. Totally breaks the SEAL mold in terms of that big buff, guy that people see in Hollywood or on the show SEAL Team. And when he would cancel those Friday meetings, because his commander is calling him to some meeting, I'd be like, that's bullshit. Like, he can't cancel these meetings. But because
you found value in those.
Those conversations were not a one-way street. It was a philosophical conversation of, let's talk about this subject. And you try to reshape it and then open it up to the group. And that's the same way in my keynotes. I'm not coming in as a subject matter expert. And one, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about what exceptional leaders I served for, what I watched them do. And I'll sort of self-deprecate and talk about some things I've wildly messed up, and some things I've done well that I'm proud of. But leadership is oral plagiarism, passed down through history. Yeah. And what people understand with the increased adoption and advancement of technology, leadership principles are time-tested and fundamental, and they don't change. Maybe
all the way back to Sun Tzu.
The application of the new environment and parameters is what we have to determine. So I like to have conversations when I have these keynotes and get people. Critical thinking is, I think we can make an argument that critical thinking has declined within education. I mean, you look at other countries, especially Eastern Bloc or East Asian or Asian education, there's very little multiple choice or true and false. It is all state your case. They're trying to sort of use that Socratic method. But you also said something, and the humility comes from one thing. We didn't bring all our boys home. And while it's not, I'm not the arbiter of how guys conduct themselves out in town to beat my chest like certain soft vets do and talk about war. War is fucking stupid, but necessary as long as humans.
There's evil out there.
As long as humans walk the earth. And it goes back to that old John Stuart Mill quote: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to stand by and do nothing."
Do nothing.
Now we can get into the United States and their involvement in certain conflicts and trying to get involved in certain cultures, which has been flawed based off the information very smart people made.
Couldn't agree more.
But I didn't accomplish one single thing on my own. Not a thing. Everything has involved a team, and teams it's one of the most rewarding things in life to be part of a team. But just like there's pros and cons of technology, teams can also be infuriating. I mean, you look at, let's tie it back to, did you watch The Last Dance about the Bulls? Amazing
documentary.
Amazing. Yeah. And destroyed, because I was in my teenage years in high school when the Bulls were dominant. You thought they're this team that's just, they all get along, they all like each other, there's total alignment, and it proved not to be the case. And teams are dynamic, and there's a difference between love and like. Did I love all my guys? Without a doubt. Did I like them all? Absolutely not. And not all of them like me, and that's fine. Be a pro, be a professional. It's the ability to put your feelings aside to work with somebody you don't necessarily like to achieve the mission. And that's, it's a maturating young talent to understand that. and really remove the emotion and develop emotional regulation or emotional intelligence, that has got to be one of the key attributes in anyone you hire, is the ability to regulate your emotions, especially during hard times.
I'll tell you, I have two co-founders, both former Army. I could not give them more shit, right?
Of course, that's the banter. That's the banter.
Then they're both bullet sponges, and I love them. They are my brothers. And someone was asking me once, right? And I came from a technical background, but it doesn't mean that you have to have one to be successful in this industry, right? So I'm very quick on pointing out all the aviation boats mates and the damage control men and all the other people from the ranks that I've hired that are crushing it in this industry, right? And I take pride in that. I work in a unique situation where the industry is starving. Like I said, if we have 300,000 people we're short now, and our industry is 25 years old, and 50% of our industry has been in this industry for more than 20 years, and half of them had a full career somewhere else before they got here. So there's only a few things that keep them from retiring right now. It could be their 401k or their retirement, and that could be because they're waiting for the end of an election cycle, because who knows what could happen to our economy. So stabilizing the economy will be a big factor for watching these people retire. And that could be as a byproduct of de-escalations between us and China, or an elimination of a couple wars in Israel, Russia and Ukraine. So like, if you take some of those variables away, when we get a new administration, one would hope, and I'm a hopeful person, that a lot of the stabilization that we hope to achieve across the world right now starts calling, like, you're going to have cyclical cycles of good and bad. You know, the rule of threes: 1/3's good, 1/3's great, and 1/3 shit. And I'd like to think that we just went through the shit phase, which means we got some good and some great coming.
The bell curve, as I call it. Yeah.
And I think I could reinforce all that with this industry and take us back to some of the things that we were talking about. And that is, you know, I talk about the fourth industrial revolution, where the fourth industrial revolution started in 2000 at the end of the third. And the third is where we started being like, hey,
and I'm sorry, it ended at the
dot-com bubble
burst.
Yep. When that ended in 2000 is when we started the fourth, and there was no gap in between the third and the fourth. For the first time, there was no gap in between the industrial revolutions. We went from one to the next, and then bookended. I mean, there's a couple people that'll argue, and they're obviously scholars with big fat brains. I'm not going to compete against a Stanford dude, right? But like, you could talk to 5 different doctors and say this hurts, and you could get 5 different diagnoses, and you could kind of get the same out of these industry experts. So I'm going to try to aggregate and consolidate and harmonize into a collective narrative that sings on behalf of, it represents the most objective truth of the industry. And right now you have, you know, a lot of things that we got in the fourth industrial revolution, but we started taking pollution a little bit more serious. We started taking global warming more serious. We started taking, you know, all these things, because information becomes more readily available. We started learning, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't. I mean, there's pushes in some places now to limit how much social media we give certain people at certain ages. And why wouldn't we, right? I mean, if you have to be 18 to serve your country and vote, or, you know, 21 to drink alcohol, you should have to have some other age restrictions to do other things that could have life-changing circumstances at an earlier age, right? And technology is saying, hey, look, let's do the linear trends. Let's see what history has proven us. And with that, we could probably forecast that out a little bit more and be like, hey, based on this rate, shit's bad. Now, we're also teaching technology, so large language models, and we're just feeding it buckets of data that has been created by man or woman or human. And that information is going into a vehicle that is educating something. And at some point, that machine, whatever that first AI machine is, that arrives to a capacity in which we all objectively agree that the accuracy is pretty on point. When that level of technology starts telling us how to eliminate harming ourselves and sabotaging ourselves, we will start measuring the unintended consequences faster, right? So healthcare and medical, those groups were doing a lot of ethics in advance of going out and practicing medicine or practicing law, to make sure that they weren't doing something that have a negative, shattering impact on society by creating this new law, or the things that we were doing in healthcare to be like, look, but I was at a bar the other night where some dude's like, look, I work for this medical company. We do, give me your DNA. We will 3D image a brand new lung for you. And when your lung collapses, we'll put this on, and it's going to marry up to your body. And it's not making you a cyborg, but that will certainly extend your longevity. So like, you'll see life extend. You'll see people have we went into the fourth industrial revolution in 2000. We ended at the end of COVID. right? And in that time, we got AI, we got AR, VR, autonomous driving vehicles, drone technology. We advanced nuclear in multiple different ways, fission, fusion, and we started figuring out, hey man, we have an untenable and unscalable demand and appetite for power, and data centers are a big driving force behind that. And people that were just using technology never they would lose their mind if they had to wait 5 seconds to get back to what their Facebook post was 2 years ago. And you're like, listen, man, technology is evolving so fast. And like we had what's called the Internet of Things, IoT, and that's what we always used. And that's what really built this industry 25 years ago. And then we got into cloud. And when we hit this huge rate, and like between 2014, 2016, we started seeing deal constructs eclipse anything that we used to do in the past. So like the volume and velocity in which we were building at, we just couldn't keep up with it. We build the sky for the cloud, right? This is a cathedral that serves as this farm of technology, and it's the on-ramp for the whole internet, right? And they're built as a hub and spoke throughout NFL cities in the United States. And we started building there, right? And then the fourth industrial revolution, we discovered, based on the access to technology that gave us access to more information, the ability to process it and understand how to interpret it. Now we're like, oh shit, ESG is a factor, DEI is, we started really saying, hey, but it's a Goldilocks thing. Every industrial revolution gives us shit, and it's not right, but we will settle. We found gun laws so we don't have people running around doing certain shit. We still do, but I mean, we also have amendments.
Mental health.
Mental health is a factor. And I think that's technology is going to help us figure those things out faster. I'm more hopeful because when we started the fifth industrial revolution in 2020 at the end of COVID, the whole objective and intent of the fifth industrial revolution is for mankind to have a healthier and more harmonious relationship with the machines and the technology in their life. Meaning, look, I don't have a social media presence. I have like 300 followers on Instagram because I just didn't give a shit. I'm private.
You probably still don't.
And I have a lot of people on my LinkedIn because I care everything about that.
Yes.
Right.
I agree.
Because that's who I am. The other parts of who I am that's private and privileged for all of us, not just Kirk. Like we have the right to have some element of privacy and we want those things. But I stayed away from social media because I didn't want to invade in my privacy until I learned now, as an example of having a healthier and more harmonious relationship with technology, I have an Instagram now and I use it to find cooking recipes or workout recipes, or there's shit that you've posted that I've liked that inspired me. And there's other people. I could get a Mark Anthony poem about women that's romantic. I could find anything I want to inspire me. I could use that technology in a way where it doesn't compromise my integrity of security. And now it inspires me and it has a greater impact on my ability to lead, right? Technology is finding a better balance in all of us. Yourself will be included.
Amen to that. I am fascinated with AI.